consider yourself a new sex symbol for the younger generation?
Oh yes. I mean, it's not that I consider myself that. I just have to concede the point.
PSWs and families. Even though we would like to assume that our loved ones and residents are independent and capable, it is important to assess the risk of falling. You as PSWs and families have lots of knowledge and experience working with these people. Therefore, we would just like to enhance your knowledge of hazard awareness. More specifically, we're going to address the Mobility Interaction Falls chart.
By the end of this segment, you should know why to use the Mobility Interaction Falls chart, when to use the Mobility Interactions Fall chart, and lastly, how to use the Mobility Interactions Falls chart.
But I'm not going to teach you because studies have shown that you're more likely to watch a video with hot men in it. That's why these guys are going to show you.
Hello there, I'm Zach. I'm here with my two friends, Matt and Mark. We're here to teach you about the Mobility's Falls chart.
Looks confusing, eh? The chart is actually made up of 4 very simple tests. The first test is stop walking when talking. The second test is difference in timed up and go. The third test is the vision test. And lastly is the concentration test. Test number 1. Stop walking when talking.
If the resident stops walking when they begin to talk, they are at a higher risk for falling.
Let's see if Margaret and Kathy pass the stop walking when talking test.
So Margaret, you want to go for a walk today?
Oh yes, I've been looking forward to this all day.
Hey, well, let's go then.
Okay.
So how are you feeling today?
Did Margaret pass the stop walking when talking test? To pass this test, she must continue walking when talking. As you can see, Margaret continued walking when she was talking. Therefore, she passed the test.
Are you ready for your walk?
Yep.
Come on.
Did Kathy pass the stop walking when talking test? To pass this test, she must continue walking when talking. As you can see, Kathy stopped walking when she was talking. Therefore, she failed the test. Test number 2 is the difference in timed up and go.
This test requires the resident to rise from their chair, walk 3 meters, turn around and walk back. This is a 2-part test. The first part requires the resident to be hands-free. The second part requires the resident to hold a glass of water. The difference between the time is greater than 5 seconds. The resident is at higher risk of falling.
Let's see if Margaret and Kathy pass the difference in timed up and go test.
This is easy.
Did Margaret pass the difference in timed up and go test? In order for Margaret to pass the timed up and go test, the time difference between both her tests needs to be under 5 seconds. Let's take a look at Margaret's 2 tests. When she was walking without water in her hand, it took 11 seconds. When she was walking with water in her hand, it took 12 seconds. 12 seconds subtract 11 seconds equals 1 second. That's less than a 5-second difference. This means she has passed the test. Did Kathy pass the difference in timed up and go test? In order for Kathy to pass the timed up and go test, the time difference between both her tests needs to be under 5 seconds. Let's take a look at Kathy's two tests. When she was walking without water in her hand, it took 19 seconds. When she was walking with water in her hand, it took 32 seconds. 32 seconds subtract 19 seconds equals 13 seconds. That's more than a 5-second difference. This means she failed the test. Test number 3 is the vision test.
A resident must be able to read 5mm text with capital letters from a reading distance. If the resident's unable to do so, they are at higher risk for falling.
Let's see if Kathy and Dorothy passed the vision test. Did Kathy pass the vision test? In order for her to pass the vision test, she must have no problems reading 5mm print at reading distance. As you can see, Kathy has no trouble reading her novel. This means she has passed the vision test. Did Dorothy pass the vision test? In order for her to pass the vision test, she must have no problems reading 5mm print at reading distance. As you can see, Dorothy is having problems reading her novel. This means she did not pass the vision test. Test number 4 is the concentration test.
If the resident is unable to follow a television show, or if they continually lose the thread of conversation, they are at a higher risk for falling.
Let's see if Margaret, Kathy, and Dorothy pass the concentration test.
Oh, Sean!
Did Margaret pass the concentration test? In order for her to pass the concentration test, she must be able to follow a conversation or TV show with no problems. As you can see, Margaret is having no problems following her TV show. This means she has passed the test.
Doing beautiful today. So, I hear we're getting chicken noodle soup for lunch.
Oh yes, those PSWs are really attractive these days.
You know, I think my husband's gonna finally take me out of this hotel.
It's your birthday? Happy birthday!
Did Dorothy and Kathy pass the concentration test? In order for them to pass the concentration test, they must be able to follow a television show or conversation with no problems.
These days.
You know, I think my husband's gonna finally take me out of this hotel.
As you can see, both Dorothy and Kathy are having problems following conversation. This means they both failed the test. Now let's put it all together and figure out who is at risk for falling. In this video, you have learned that there are 4 tests that can be used to help figure out if your resident or loved one is at risk for falling. If they fail any of them, they are at a higher risk for falling. Margaret is mobile, meaning she can walk by herself. The first test she did was the stop walking when talking. She passed this test. The second test she did was the diff tug. She passed this test. The third test she did was the vision test. She passed this test. The fourth test she did was the concentration test. She passed this test. This means she is at low risk for falling. Kathy can't walk by herself, therefore she uses her cane to help her walk. The first test she did was the stop walking when talking test. She failed this test. Therefore, she is automatically at high risk for falling. Because she failed this test, none of the other tests need to be done. Dorothy is immobile and in a wheelchair. Therefore, she is automatically at a low risk for falling. After using the charts, you can see that Margaret is at a low risk for falling, Kathy is at a high risk for falling, and Dorothy is at a low risk for falling. Everyone can play a role in falls risk prevention. When you're spending time with a resident or a loved one, it is your job to continually monitor the risk of falling. You can do this easily by using any of the tests in this video. The tests don't need to be the exact same. For example, in the difference in timed up and go test, they don't always need to carry a glass of water. It could be a plate of food. But the main take-home message is, if you notice the resident or your loved one has problems with any of the tests, they may be at a higher risk of falling. It is important to take action as soon as possible to prevent a devastating fall.